The outbreak of war by the United States and Israel against Iran has sent tremors through the global economy, exposing just how fragile the world's energy architecture remains. What began as a geopolitical confrontation has rapidly morphed into a full-scale economic shockwave, radiating outward from the Persian Gulf to Europe, Asia, and beyond. At the center of this storm lies a narrow stretch of water whose closure represents one of the gravest nightmares in global trade, the Strait of Hormuz. Roughly 1/5 of the world's oil supply typically flows through this 21-mile-wide passage between Iran and Oman. In practice, usable shipping space is even narrower, just 2 lanes, each about 2 miles wide, through which between 70 and 80 tankers pass daily under normal conditions. It's often described as the motorway of global energy trade, the indispensable artery connecting Gulf producers to global markets. In the current conflict, however, that artery has effectively been severed, with insurers designating the zone a war risk area and shippers unwilling to expose vessels to missile or drone strikes. Tanker traffic has ground to a halt. Even without a formal legal blockade, the effect is the same. Energy exports are frozen. Despite the United States' offer to escort vessels through the strait, the implications are immediate. Oil prices have surged past $85 a barrel, with market speculation intensifying around the psychologically critical $100 mark. Yet oil is only part of the story. Natural gas markets have reacted even more violently. Qatar, responsible for roughly 20% of global liquefied natural gas exports, has no viable export route that bypasses Hormuz. When Qatari energy operations pause, Europe and Asia feel the shock almost instantly. In recent trading sessions, European natural gas prices have doubled. What initially appeared to be a contained confrontation between Israel, the United States, and Iran has evolved into something far broader. Gulf states, long striving to position themselves as stable business hubs, insulated from regional turmoil, have been pulled towards the epicenter. Missile strikes on Saudi energy infrastructure and threats against key oil cities such as Dhahran underscore the vulnerability of the region's economic crown jewels. For countries like Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Bahrain, and Qatar, the crisis is not merely about oil revenue. It strikes at the foundation of their modern identity. Over the past decade, these states have invested heavily in diversifying their economies, marketing themselves as financial centers, tourism destinations, and expatriate havens. Dubai, for example, hosts thousands of foreign businesses and a large expatriate workforce drawn by tax advantages and stability. Rising insurance costs, covering everything from shipping to skyscrapers, threaten to undermine that business model. If the Gulf ceases to be perceived as safe, capital could retreat swiftly. At the same time, the conflict exposes asymmetric vulnerabilities across the global economy. The United States, now the world's largest oil producer, occupies a comparatively strong position. Higher oil prices may hurt consumers at the pump, but American producers benefit from elevated crude prices. Record levels of U.S. LNG contracts suggest that American energy firms could profit from disrupted Gulf exports. Yet even the United States is not immune. Refining capacity constraints mean that higher crude prices can still translate into domestic cost pressures. Meanwhile, Europe and Asia are far more exposed. Countries such as Japan and India remain heavily dependent on Middle Eastern imports. Europe, having already endured an energy shock following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, now faces renewed inflationary risks. Energy markets are globally priced. Even if a country maintains physical supply through domestic production or diversified imports, it must still pay prevailing international prices. Thus, a surge in oil and gas benchmarks transmits inflation worldwide. This inflationary pulse reverberates through bond markets, currencies, and equities. Expectations of central bank interest rate cuts, once considered imminent in several developed economies, have been scaled back sharply. Higher energy prices feed into headline inflation, making policymakers reluctant to ease monetary conditions. Consumers, already strained by previous price shocks, face the prospect of prolonged high borrowing costs. The conflict also threatens food security. Approximately 30% of the world's urea, a key fertilizer component, passes through Hormuz. Disruption could drive up agricultural input costs, compounding existing pressures created by the war in Ukraine. In Gulf states themselves, where up to 70% of food imports transit the strait, shortages could emerge if the closure persists. While most economies suffer, some actors may gain. Russia, for instance, stands to benefit from higher oil prices. Every dollar added to the global oil benchmark increases revenue for the Kremlin, bolstering its war chest amid ongoing conflict in Ukraine. With Iranian oil exports constrained by sanctions and conflict, Russia faces less competition in supplying energy-hungry markets like China. Iran's own calculus appears centered less on profit than on leverage. Sanctions limit its ability to reap full financial gains from rising prices. Instead, Tehran's strategy seems aimed at maximizing economic pain for adversaries. Unable to match the military capabilities of the United States and Israel directly, Iran can weaponize geography, turning energy flows into a tool of asymmetric retaliation. For the United Kingdom and the European Union, the crisis arrives at an awkward moment. Fiscal plans built on assumptions of falling gas prices and stabilizing inflation now look fragile. Government forecasts projecting declines in energy costs risk rapid obsolescence if the conflict drags on. Calls to revive North Sea oil and gas production illustrate the tension between energy security and long-term climate commitments. Yet experts caution that any revival would yield limited global impact and require years of investment. Prices are set internationally. Marginal increases in domestic production cannot offset a sustained closure of Hormuz. The broader concern is psychological. Markets have weathered dramatic events in recent years, from tariff wars to brief Middle Eastern flare-ups, with surprising resilience. This time, though, feels different. The scale of disruption, coupled with the real prospect of a prolonged regional war, challenges the assumption that energy chokepoints are relics of the past. If hostilities subside within days, the economic damage may prove limited. Existing oil inventories and seasonal demand patterns could cushion short-term disruption. Markets might retreat from their peaks and inflationary effects could fade. But if the conflict extends beyond several weeks, the calculus darkens. Stockpiles would deplete, prices could climb well above $100 a barrel, central banks would delay rate cuts or even contemplate tightening. Gulf states might intervene more directly, escalating into a broader regional confrontation with sectarian undertones. In such a scenario, energy exports, LNG shipments, and fertilizer flows could remain suppressed for months. The global economy, already navigating post-pandemic adjustments and technological upheaval, would confront a new sinkhole. Growth would slow, inflation would persist, political tensions within importing countries would intensify as households absorb higher costs. Unbeknownst to Donald Trump, the Strait of Hormuz has long symbolized the fragility of global interdependence. Today, that fragility is no longer theoretical. The economic shockwave from war in the Gulf reveals how swiftly geopolitical conflict can mutate into worldwide financial strain. Whether this moment becomes a brief spike or a prolonged crisis depends not on military developments but on the willingness of regional powers to step back from the brink. For now, the world watches oil tankers idle and waits. I'm Anthony Davis. You can find me on the 5 Minute News YouTube channel and podcast, on Wednesdays co-hosting Uncovered, on Global AF, on Legal AF, and on Sundays on The Weekend Show with MeidasTouch.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.